They say there's an ointment the devil gives you that turns you into a wolf the minute you rub it in. Or that he was born feet first and had a wolf for his father, and his torso is a man's, but his legs and genitals are a wolf's, and he has a wolf's heart. 7 years is a werewolf's natural span, but if you burn his human clothing, you condemn him to wolfishness for the rest of his life. So old wives hereabouts think it some protection to throw a hat or an apron at the werewolf, as if clothes made the man. Yet by the eyes, those phosphorescent eyes, you know him in all his shapes, the eyes alone unchanged by metamorphosis. Before he can become a wolf, the lycanthrope strips stark naked. If you spy a naked man among the pines, you must run as if the devil were after you. It is midwinter, and the robin, the friend of man, sits on the handle of the gardener's spade and sings. It is the worst time in all the year for wolves, but this strong-minded child insists she will go off through the wood. She is quite sure the wild beasts cannot harm her, although, well warned, she lays a carving knife in the basket her mother has packed with cheeses. There is a bottle of harsh liquor distilled from brambles, a batch of flat oat cakes baked on the hearthstone, a pot or two of jam. The flaxen-haired girl will take these delicious gifts to a reclusive grandmother so old the burden of her years is crushing her to death. Granny lives 2 hours' trudge through the winter woods. The child wraps herself up in a thick shawl, draws it over her head. She steps into the stout wooden shoes. She is dressed and ready, and it is Christmas Eve. The malign door of the solstice still swings upon its hinges, but she has been too much loved ever to feel scared. Children do not stay young for long in this savage country. There are no toys for them to play with, so they work hard and grow wise, but this one, so pretty and the youngest of her family, a little late-comer, had been indulged by her mother and the grandmother who'd knitted her the red shawl that, today, has the ominous, if brilliant, look of blood on snow. Her breasts have just begun to swell. Her hair is like lint, so fair it hardly makes a shadow on her pale forehead. Her cheeks are an emblematic scarlet and white, and she has just started her woman's bleeding, the clock inside her that will strike henceforward once a month. She stands and moves within the invisible pentacle of her own virginity. She is an unbroken egg. She is a sealed vessel. She has inside her a magic space, the entrance to which is shut tight with a plug of membrane. She is a closed system. She does not know how to shiver. She has her knife, and she is afraid of nothing. Her father might forbid her if he were home, but he is away in the forest gathering wood, and her mother cannot deny her. The forest closed upon her like a pair of jaws. There is always something to look at in the forest, even in the middle of winter. The huddled mounds of birds succumb to the lethargy of the season, heaped on the creaking boughs, and too forlorn to sing. The bright frills of the winter fungi on the blotched trunks of the trees, the cuneiform slots of rabbits and deer, the herringbone tracks of the birds, a hare as lean as a rasher of bacon streaking across the path where the thin sunlight dapples the russet brakes of last year's bracken. When she heard the freezing howl of a distant wolf, her practised hand sprang to the handle of her knife, but she saw no sign of a wolf at all. nor of a naked man neither. But then she heard a clattering among the brushwood, and there sprang on to the path a fully clothed one, a very handsome young one, in the green coat and wide-awake hat of a hunter, laden with carcasses of game birds. She had her hand on her knife at the first rustle of twigs, but he laughed with a flash of white teeth when he saw her and made her a comic yet flattering little bow. She'd never seen such a fine fellow before, not among the rustic clowns of her native village. So on they went together, through the thickening light of the afternoon. Soon they were laughing and joking like old friends. When he offered to carry her basket, she gave it to him, although her knife was in it, because he told her his rifle would protect them. As the day darkened, it began to snow again. She felt the first flakes settle on her eyelashes, but now there was only half a mile to go, when there would be a fire and hot tea and a warm one surely, for the dashing huntsman as well as for herself. This young man had a remarkable object in his pocket. It was a compass. She looked at the little round glass face in the palm of his hand and watched the wavering needle with a vague wonder. He assured her this compass had taken him safely through the wood on his hunting trip, because the needle always told him with perfect accuracy where the north was. She did not believe it. She knew she should never leave the path on the way through the wood, or else she would be lost instantly. He laughed at her again. Gleaming trails of spittle clung to his teeth. He said if he plunged off the path into the forest that surrounded them, he could guarantee to arrive at her grandmother's house a good quarter of an hour before she did. Plotting his way through the undergrowth with his compass, while she trudged the long way along the winding path. "I don't believe you. Besides, aren't you afraid of the wolves?" He only tapped the gleaming butt of his rifle and grinned. "Is it a bet?" he asked her. "Shall we make a game of it? What will you give me if I get to your grandmother's house before you?" "What would you like?" she asked disingenuously. "A kiss." Commonplaces of a rustic seduction. She lowered her eyes and blushed. He went through the undergrowth and took her basket with him, but she forgot to be afraid of the beasts, although now the moon was rising, for she wanted to dawdle on her way to make sure the handsome gentleman would win his wager. Grandmother's house stood by itself a little way out of the village. The young man stepped delicately. Grandmother's house stood by itself a little way out of the village. The freshly falling snow blew in eddies about the kitchen garden, and the young man stepped delicately up the snowy path to the door as if he were reluctant to get his feet wet, swinging his bundle of game and the girl's basket and humming a little tune to himself. There is a faint trace of blood on his chin. He has been snacking on his catch. He rapped upon the panels with his knuckles. Aged and frail Granny is 3/4 succumbed to the mortality the ache in her bones promises her, and almost ready to give in entirely. A boy came out from the village to build up her hearth for the night an hour ago, and the kitchen crackles with busy firelight. She has her Bible for company. She is a pious old woman. She is propped up on several pillows in the bed set into the wall peasant fashion, wrapped up in the patchwork quilt she made before she was married, more years ago than she cares to remember. 2 China spaniels with liver-colored blotches on their coats and black noses sit on either side of the fireplace. There is a bright rug of woven rags on the pantiles. The grandfather clock ticks away her eroding time. We keep the wolves outside by living well. He rapped upon the panels with his hairy knuckles. It is your granddaughter, he mimicked in a high soprano. Lift up the latch and walk in, my darling. You can tell them by their eyes, eyes of a beast of prey, nocturnal, devastating eyes as red as a wound. You can hurl your Bible at him and your apron after, Granny. You thought that was a sure prophylactic against these infernal vermin. Now call on Christ and his mother and all the angels in heaven to protect you, but it won't do you any good. His feral muzzle is sharp as a knife. He drops his golden burden of gnawed pheasant on the table, and puts down your dear girl's basket too. Oh my God, what have you done with her?